All right. Well, outstanding. Thank you so much. It's great to be here and happy Star Wars Day to everybody. If you're watching it live, I guess that is May the 4th, right? May the 4th be with you. What a treat to be here. And I'm so grateful and thank you, Mike, for your invitation to participate in this event. And thank you to First Church Christ Scientist, Newport Beach. What an awesome event and series, and I feel really privileged to be with you today and to be able to explore this topic together. So I've had some fun putting this talk together, and I hope you enjoy it. I've chosen to chat with you about authentic connections. So it's no news to you, especially teens, that we live in a very connected world. Just look at what we're doing right now. So I'm in Denver, and you're all over. Maybe Newport Beach, but maybe spread out all across the country. And here we are, we're connected. We're meeting each other, we're sharing ideas and stories and sharing an experience. It's pretty cool that we're able to do this. And yet, I'll bet you also know feelings of isolation and loneliness and maybe even just a hunger for real connection. So how can these things both be true at the same time? We are so connected and we are longing for connection. That's a pretty big question. Well, before I get into all this in depth, I'd like to start with a quick exercise. So wherever you are, in person or on video or in a replay, I invite you to close your eyes for a moment. So let's consider two things. First, just thinking to yourself, try to think of a time when you felt the most isolated or alone in the last year. Not just physically separated and by yourself, but maybe it's a time when you just felt like something was missing, a sense of isolation. I'll give you about 30 seconds to think about that. The next question is when in that same time do you feel like you've been the happiest or the most satisfied? And that's not just kind of excited or having a good time, but when were you most deeply happy? Again, just take a few seconds, think about that. In the last year, when have you felt the happiest or most fulfilled and satisfied? Okay, go ahead and open your eyes, of course. So I'm curious, here's a rhetorical question to you. What were you doing in both these extremes? What was different between that first time and that other instance when you were most happy? Now, I don't know the answer to this, and certainly everyone is different and unique. There's no right or wrong way to answer these questions. Certainly no right answers. But research shows that on the whole, happiness tends to come from deep, meaningful connections. And so times associated with happiness are often those where we experience those connections in action. So I'm willing to bet that for many of you, the times when you felt isolated, lonely, or dissatisfied have been times when you felt something was missing in your social relationships. And it is likely that times when you felt happiest and most satisfied have been times when you were simply with those with whom you feel a close connection. So however these questions shaped up for you, the underlying issues of happiness, fulfillment, meaning point to something significant. It's something central to a lot of the work that I do and to the practice of Christian Science too. So a couple of quick stories to start us out. I've noticed a trend over the last few years. I spent, as Mike said, a little over a decade serving as a chaplain in the Navy and the Marine Corps. The chaplain's job is to take care of the spiritual needs of service members. And it basically boils down to two things: relationships and presence. taking the time to build trusting relationships so that there is this kind of existing connection in times of need. And then sometimes it's simply being there. We call this a ministry of presence. It was pretty cool to have a job that hinged on something so simple. Build relationships, build trust, and then just be there. Well, when I first got to my Marine Corps units, I was with a tank battalion and then an infantry battalion. And I found it really hard to build relationships with the Marines. Part of it is that it just takes time. It was something I certainly learned, right? It takes time to build real relationships. So no biggie there. Patience is a virtue. But I also noticed that everyone was kind of distracted. So I'd walk into a space and, they just weren't necessarily interested in engaging with me as I'm kind of passing through. So the Marines, they make a big deal about the unit and the team, right? Semper Fi, always being faithful. We call it the esprit de corps, this sort of spirit of unity that they have. But I wasn't seeing this famous unity and sense of cohesion. And then after a little while, we went out into the field, we'd call it, right, into these training areas for days on end to train, and I saw everything change. After a couple of days, they actually started to talk to each other. The conversations got deeper and more thoughtful. They learned about each other. They formed real relationships. Well, what was different? Pretty much they had no phones with them. It was that simple. We were way out in the desert training for combat missions. And this wasn't just an interesting side effect of training. We actually needed those relationships and the trust that comes with them to go and do our jobs. Being in this together was literally part of the training. And I saw the same exact thing happen when I served on ships and submarines. Everyone resisted breaking that cell phone link with the outside world. I remember pulling away from shore and people standing out on the back of the ship, trying to catch those last little bits of cell signal. But then they would say, not having that was actually the best part of being at sea. And the great thing was it also gave those sailors and Marines something so important, gave them these authentic connections. They'd talk about it for years. Many would say it was the most important thing in their military service. It's the relationships they built. But many of you can relate to this experience, I'm sure. All right, for the last 2 years, I've been working for Adventure Unlimited. And this whole business of authentic connections is super important to us. I've seen the same thing that happened to my Marines happen with campers each summer at the AU ranches here in Colorado. Some campers, especially the teens, stay for multiple sessions. And I always found this very interesting. So they'll have a couple of weeks together at camp, and then a couple of days when they hang out together before the next session starts. The pace is a little different, and for little pockets in there, everyone can use their phones. Well, I bet you can guess what happens. If you've gone to a summer camp, you know what this is like. The end of the session is pretty rough because you've made these amazing friends, and now you have to say goodbye. I can think of more than one occasion when we've had to get the bus on its way to the airport, and there are these friends locked in a hug. You practically have to pry them apart in order to get one of them up onto that bus. We just don't want to let go because we are feeling that thing that we really long for and need in our lives. It's these authentic connections. But when the camp session is over and out come the phones, well, suddenly we're reconnected to everything else. Instagram, X, TikTok, you name it. We're once again connected, but that sense of connection sort of fizzles away. It's crazy to watch. But don't worry, not all hope is lost. In fact, there's every reason to be very hopeful. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So what are our kind of goals for our time together? This is what I've put together. First, we want to know the difference between being connected and feeling connection. We want to get a sense of where real connection is rooted. I'd like to consider the way spiritual understanding can support connection. And then I suggest we think about how we can help nurture this in our lives. So a little dating myself here, right? But I remember when Facebook first came out, and it was very different back then. You actually had to have a college email to get a Facebook account. So they were literally limiting the number of accounts you could get. They were sort of trying to keep people away. It was exclusive. And it was designed to connect with the people actually around you at your school. Such a difference. I remember when I first got to my college, we were all handed these little pamphlets, and it had pictures and names of everybody in the freshman class and where they were from. And it was called the Facebook. It's pretty funny. So this first kind of online Facebook was supposed to replicate that, but hey, it was real time. You could keep up with people. And it was called social media because it was a way to be in touch with friends and share this information. The theory was that this was a tool for connection. I don't claim to know what exactly the motives were, but that's the way it felt, right? But it quickly evolved into something totally different. It became less about communicating with our friends and much more about keeping us engaged with Facebook. Our attention became the real goal of the platform. And so the whole system was shaped to keep us online or keep us coming back online. All the other platforms that followed the same basic plan. So, there's a lot of money to be made by keeping us connected to the app. That's that sort of doom scroll that we get ourselves stuck into. So I'm curious how many of you in our little exercise a moment ago found a link between feeling lonely and isolated and moments when you were deep in social media. Maybe one kind of is associated with the other for one reason or another. Tons of studies show that we actually feel worse when we've been on it. It causes us not to be present where we are. This is why it was such whiplash for our campers to go from 2 weeks with no social media to this mad dash to try to catch up. It all moves so fast, and we are saddled with this huge pressure to constantly be connected. And it's more than like a FOMO. It's a seriously unhealthy rewiring of how we work as social beings. Social media is also really fake, if you haven't noticed, right? It gives us this very skewed version of other people's lives, but that's a whole nother issue and another talk. So if all that is part of being constantly and almost inescapably connected, well, then what is connection? So just a little bit of wordplay here, but I'm using connection as that deeper, meaningful relationship with what and who matters to us. So family, close friends, a caring community, a shared purpose. Really, it's love and belonging. It's that sense of meaning in our lives. That's connection. And being connected is really about ourselves, right? It's kind of fear-based, like, what am I missing? Where do I fit in with everybody else? How do I measure up? Connection with all these other things, these positive things, is about being part of something bigger than ourselves. And there's nothing more profoundly bigger than ourselves than God. I just read a really interesting study about the connection between happiness and fulfillment and a person's participation in a faith practice, especially a faith community, whatever that is. So simply put, if you are part of a church community, for example, and believe in what that community teaches, you are way more likely to be happy and feel a sense of meaning in your life. It's not even close. And the difference is biggest in societies like ours, where we have great access to technology. That's a big deal. Remember when I said that my job as a chaplain in the Navy was about relationships and presence? That wasn't just true on the personal level, like getting to know the Marines and sailors and being present with them in tough times. That was very important. But it was also about representing a much deeper relationship and presence, helping to connect them with their faith, whatever it was, helping them to understand how powerful a sense of spiritual fitness is, and reminding them about God's presence, especially when things were really tough, like in a war zone. Real connection isn't just from one person to another. It's connecting in something or through something. And while this might be shared values or even, shared hobbies, Those are great, and it does happen. The strongest connection is a spiritual one. So I remember something that a professor said during a college class about the Bible, kind of an introduction class. And that was that almost all of the Bible, from Genesis through Revelation, it's all about relationships. From the first chapter of Genesis, right, we're made in God's image and likeness. Well, that's a pretty close relationship. And then Abraham, Jacob, Moses, all the prophets, it was all about God being their God, present with them. There's all these reassurances, where you go, I will be with you. If you're not sure what to do, I'll be with your mouth, right? It's this incredible sense of close relationship. This was even formalized by what's called a covenant, right? That's a kind of old-fashioned way of saying it's a contract, a deal between God and God's children, right? If you do this, I'll do this. Follow the commandments, and I'll be with you. The whole point of the law boils down to being in right relationship with God and with our neighbor. And Jesus, of course, always emphasized our relationship with God. That was kind of the whole message. We are God's, he explained. Our Father knows what we need, cares for us, loves us. We are God's children. Well, that's a pretty significant relationship. And it's unbreakable. So one of my favorite passages throughout Scripture is from Paul's letter to the Romans in chapter 8. I'll just read it real quick. Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulation or distress or persecution or famine or nakedness or peril or sword? He goes on to say, nay, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him that loved us. For I am persuaded that neither death nor life, nor angels nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor height, nor depth, nor any other creature shall be able to separate us from the love of God, which is in Christ Jesus, our Lord. So, impossible to be separated from God? That's a pretty serious relationship. And it wasn't just theory. This is my favorite part. Paul was persuaded that this perfect relationship, this unbreakable connection, would never change because he had seen it over and over again firsthand throughout his work and his travels. There were shipwrecks and imprisonments and stonings, disease, accidents, snake bites. I mean, Paul had seen a lot. And that led him to be convinced that this was actually true and really applicable to our experience. Mary Baker Eddy, the discoverer and founder of Christian Science, also emphasized this authentic connection to God. I love the phrase, Father, Mother, God. Such an intimate and caring relationship. She also gave us a way to think of God as real, meaningful substance for us through 7 synonyms. Principle, mind, soul, spirit, life, truth, and love. To think that we can never be separated from these is really awesome. Just spend a moment, think about that. If we're ever tempted to think that our life isn't enough, it's good to know we have this deep connection to life, God. If it doesn't seem like there's real meaning in who we are or what we do, we can remember that we have this inescapable connection to soul, real substance that is so much more than stuff or status. If we just don't feel loved or lovable, we'll do well to know that God is love. We cannot ever for a moment or in any way be separated from God's love, from love itself. That's pretty awesome. So if we're looking for real connection, it is rooted in what is deeply meaningful, especially love, life, and soul. That's all great, and it's valuable to really explore this relationship with God. But can it make a difference in the everyday parts of our lives, like relationships? Oh, yeah, it totally does. I learned this lesson at a point when I was really feeling like I was never going to kind of find fulfilling relationships. Right? I had some really good friends, but I was I was still lonely. And I loved Christian Science, and I thought a lot about God and what it means to be loved by God. But I still really wanted to feel a sense of connection with someone. And it was a struggle. I feel like it went on forever. In the retrospect, it was probably not that bad, but it was a big deal to me. And I remember very clearly that one day when a dear friend helped me out. I think I was complaining a little bit that I had no idea how I would find a good relationship. It seemed selfish to me to pray for this. I'm supposed to have everything I need and to be grateful for it, right? I mean, that was kind of this feeling that, you know, it was selfish to want a different kind of love in my life. And he blew me away with this really profound point as I was complaining. This friend of mine said, I had a right to expect that divine love was in my life in a way I could experience it meaningfully and feel fulfilled. I remember really being struck by that. It was a right. I had this right to feel something or to have something in my life. And that really got me thinking. I realized that I absolutely should expect that meaningful connection was natural and must be part of my experience. And it was like flipping a switch. I immediately began to experience the relationships that I did have in new ways. I found companionship and joy, intellectual partnership, even adventure, all right there with me. And this was just in my circle of friends around work and school and church and other things. I think in almost no time at all, I felt totally fulfilled. And that sense of pressure just went away. I wasn't missing anything. I had what I needed in these authentic relationships. I also started to see more opportunities to live out this sense of love. In fact, I even decided to volunteer to chaperone a teen event through Discovery Bound up in Vancouver, British Columbia. And this was just part of my growing sense of community. Now, ironically, this is like 15 years before I worked for Adventure Unlimited, and Discovery Bound is part of Adventure Unlimited. So, it made me very biased toward the organization in a good way. But here I just was volunteering, and I just wanted to give this sense of connection and community that I was feeling. Well, what do you think happened on that trip? Right? Yep, I met my wife. And it wasn't even a surprise. I'd never met her before, but here we were doing this activity, and it just felt completely natural and even an obvious outgrowth of the fact that divine love meets our need. It's perfectly natural that this love be in our lives in a way that we can experience it. What we said to each other when we met was literally, "Oh, there you are." It was a really authentic connection. I don't feel like it was something we had to create or scrape out of, hard work. It was recognizing that divine love, of course, is going to come out in really meaningful ways. It's awesome. Super grateful for it too, all these years later. Now, I'm not suggesting that all this is about dating or romantic relationships. It's so much more than that. It's about beginning to see that our inherent connection with God frees us to see and experience authentic connections everywhere we go. It's naturally part of those meaningful relationships that help us to, and it helps us to kind of invest in them, right? So relationships at school, certainly our sports teams and clubs, things that we unite around, our church and Sunday school. Maybe even programs like what we offer at Adventure Unlimited, things like the Discovery Bound National Leadership Council, Compass program, or Ignite, or any of the Christian Science summer camps that are out there. And of course, that's true for other kinds of camps as well. So, go find those opportunities to build connections. Nurture your relationships that you have around you, and be present with a sense of purpose that brings you together with your family and the community that's all around. So God not only makes you capable of this, but authentic connection is literally how you are made. and nothing can take that away from you. All right, thank you.